what is the Federal Reserve System? The answer is a surprise to many people, as it was to me, is that it is, first, what it is not. It is not a government agency. What? The Federal Reserve System that produces our money, the nation's money, isn't an agency of the government? The answer is no, dummy. Go look at the charter, read about it, learn about it. So that was the first thing I was shocked to find out, is that the Federal Reserve System is a private cartel of banks. Back in 1910, when the Federal Reserve System was coming into existence, was being planned at least, that was a move to put the banking industry into a cartel arrangement. Prior to that time, the investment banks were serious competitors. They were fighting with each other for dominance all around the world. You know, blood in the streets, so to speak, in the buying and selling of market shares and financing of new corporations and the big deals. I mean, that was in Paris and in London and in New York. And the guys got together and said, look, why are we competing with each other when we could all work together and each share a major part of the market? And that way we can control our competition and we can make more profits, and that'll be just fine, won't it? And so you had that famous line coming from John D. Rockefeller. It says, competition is a sin. That was his slogan in a way. And of course, he used competition to climb to the top, but once he was there, he didn't want anybody else to compete and possibly knock him off the top of the hill. So this all goes back to that time when cartelization had already spread around the world in many industries, but the banking industry was one of the last ones to go. And these banks had such tremendous economic power. We're back to follow the money again. Ownership in media outlets, so they could determine who gets good publicity and who gets bad publicity, which is a very valuable thing if you're running for Congress or Senate or president. You want to have these media companies in your hip pocket. So these banks became very powerful in politics because of their financial ability to buy politicians and influence politicians and others as well. And they put their money into media outlets and into school systems and in tax-exempt foundations, any way that they could influence public opinion and public policy. And indirectly, they came to control the government. We like to think in terms of the government controlling the Federal Reserve System. Every once in a while, you see these hearings and you see the congressmen or the senators sitting there in the dais up on the upper level, and they're looking very stern, and they're asking these hard questions of the chairman of the Federal Reserve System, who sits down below at a table and sort of looks nervous and so forth. And it sounds, by the tone of the voice and the questions that are being asked, that those guys up on the dais are really controlling the Federal Reserve System. That's why they're asking these hard questions, as though they're going to do something with the answers. Well, it's just the other way around, folks. I discovered these guys down below represent the mainspring of power, which is money. They make the money. And that's the other part of this answer. What they do is make money. They create it, and they determine the rules by which it is created. They determine who gets it and who doesn't, indirectly by determining interest rates and that kind of thing. Who gets good interest rates, who gets low interest rates. And they have inside information, and they buy politicians, and they put all this together, and these are the people who sit there quietly behind the scenes and run our government. Our government does not run the banks. The banks run the government. What is so shocking, this is what I learned, and this is the most shocking thing, is that our country no longer is in the hands of the American people. They think it is. They talk as though they go to the polls and the people vote for it, right? Well, forget the issue of rigged elections. The people vote for the candidate that they hear about and they're pressed favorably. and they vote against the candidates that they hear about in their press unfavorably, because their opinions about their candidates are determined solely by their information that comes to them through the media. Well, the banks not only own the candidates, they own the media. The Federal Reserve System is our hidden government, and we don't know it for the most part.
So Federal Reserve is not actually federal, and it's not a reserve, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
What is money?
Well, that's an interesting topic. It can be complex or simple, depending on whether you're a citizen trying to understand it, in which case you want it simple. But if you're a college professor teaching it, you want it complex. So it depends on who you go for the answer. I had to read all of the books by the college professors when I was writing my book to see how they defined money. And I was amazed to find out that almost every one of them had a slightly different definition. And they argued among themselves as to which was the correct definition. And then I went to the encyclopedia and went to the dictionaries, and I found the answer there. And it's pretty simple. Money, and for the moment, will not try and make a distinction between good money and bad money, which is money. Money is generally defined in all the dictionaries as a medium of exchange. And the word medium is important because people exchange money not because they want the money, it's because they think that if they have the money, then they can get what they want with that money. So it's a medium of exchange. If it was a direct exchange, this for that, it would be called barter. But if you don't want that, or if you do want that, and the person offering it for sale doesn't want what you have, then you can't make a trade if you're stuck with barter. But if you have something that both parties feel is of value and that they can exchange for something to another person, they'll gladly take it as a temporary medium of exchange in anticipation of being able to trade it as barter for something else. So it's a simple definition. It's a medium of exchange. Now, it turns out that there are good medium, or media, I should say, good media and poor media that you're going to exchange. And that's where it gets into the interesting part. Well, what's good and what's bad? The good part, I have to make this simple because this is not a place to go into the whole book, but good money is that money which has intrinsic value for something other than money. Something that everybody either wants or knows that there's a strong market for it and they can swap it out for something they want on its own without being money. Now, what would that be? Well, in the beginning of money, the history of money, you have to start off with the Egyptians and the ancient Egyptians. And the first money was jars of wheat. Jars of wheat. Everybody could use wheat as your food, and it could be stored in these jars for fairly long periods of time. So it had one of the qualities of good money, and that is that it had value, intrinsic value for something other than money. But if you happen to be an affluent person, a wealthy person, even in those days, you would be a person that had a lot of jars of wheat in your warehouse, and more than you could ever eat. But you had those jars of wheat, not because you were going to eat them, but you knew that you could swap a jar of wheat to somebody else for something that they had, maybe a couple of blankets or something that you wanted. And so wheat became the first widely recognized form of money. And it evolved over the years. Cows and sheep and livestock that could be converted into money became used as money. Cows especially. In fact, I understand the word fiduciary, or fiduciary, responsibility, fiduciary, comes from the Latin word fiducia, for cows. And that was in ancient Rome, cows were money. If you had a couple of cows, you could swap a cow for a great deal of other things that you want. So good money is something that has value other than being a medium of exchange. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a medium of exchange. That's the point. So I'll just stop there. There's a whole string of things that make some forms of money better than others, but let's just stop there for the moment. That's an important one. If you have something like gold or silver, a 1 ounce gold coin, let's say, and you had confidence that that was true silver, especially if you had some way to measure it, if you had a testing device, and you could say, oh, yep, that's right, that's 0.999% pure silver, and you could weigh it, and yep, that's 1 ounce. Now you've got something that is really good money. And because everybody needs silver, or not everybody, but everybody knows of somebody who needs silver. Silver is widely used. Even in old times, it was used in jewelry and knickknacks and fixtures and things. But in modern times, good Lord, silver is used in all electronics and a lot of metallurgical compounds that have qualities other than electronics and so forth. You can always find a use for, or somebody that needs and will buy silver. So that makes it an ideal medium of exchange, and gold somewhat also, without royal decree or anything, but just experience, freedom of choice, using whatever you want to use as a medium of exchange. Around the world, it always evolved eventually to gold and silver. Nobody ordered it, it's just that happens to be the one that humans always eventually came to have the most confidence in. So money, what is money then? Now, bad money is something where there's nothing behind it, nothing, no use for it except to swap. And as long as people are willing to accept it, it works. But if ever they lose confidence in it, there's no way for them to take that IOU or the piece of paper or your checkbook or those numbers that they give you that you're the proud possessor of $3,522 in your checking account. Yeah, if the bank goes belly up, find somebody that's willing to take your checkbook and give you anything in return for it. See, ink and paper are not of any value at all. So bad money is something that is not useful for anything other than money. And what more can I say? I guess that's the short answer to your question. A medium of exchange, and there's good and bad. And as long as people don't understand these principles, they're going to be hoodwinked into accepting bad money, like the American people have been hoodwinked into accepting US dollars that no longer have any backing of gold or silver. It used to be, if you took one of those dollars, it was like a receipt. Like here's how it worked, to a vault, to a bank, and say, I'm going to deposit my 1 ounce of silver, and they would give you a receipt. Okay, this receipt is good for 1 ounce of silver to the bearer on demand, either your name or the bearer on demand. There are bearer bonds and so forth. And as long as you had that, you could take it to the vault, say, okay, I want my silver back. And you get your silver in return for the money, for the paper. And that's when they said there's money that's as good as gold or good as silver, because you can swap it back into the silver or something else that has intrinsic value. Well, today, our dollar bills are worth nothing on their own. It's only because the government has the police power to force people like us to accept it. If we don't accept it, we go to prison. Otherwise, not many would accept it. They'd try something else for sure.
Another interesting concept that you introduced in your book is that a Federal Reserve actually helps increasing inflation and actually helps to fund war. And if we look at the history, Federal Reserve was created in 1913. World War I started shortly after. Then the Great Depression followed, and then World War II started. So the history just shows us this example. But speaking about today, we see that the number of countries actually refuse to deal with the US dollar anymore. And these happen to be countries that are not friendly with the United States, such as Russia, China, Iran, the rise of the BRICS nations. So what's your opinion? What can we expect within the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years from now in terms of our own well-being with where the US dollar is heading?
I almost wish you hadn't asked me that question, because I have to answer honestly, and it might be very unpleasant to hear. And many of your listeners might think, "Oh, good grief, this is garbage. It can't happen here," like they used to say. But it is happening here. So let me answer your question as I see it. I'll put that on it as I see it. The the money system in the world is in the process of changing. It's changing because of the arrival of something brand new in history. Up until now, you could go from one monetary system to the other, but they'd always be the same, identical. They would be something based on intrinsic value, like I've been talking about, but then the governments would start debauching that intrinsic value. Started off by shaving a little bit of gold off of each coin, and then they started adding other metals to the coin and cheating on the amount of precious metals that were in the coin. And then finally they got rid of the coins completely and started putting paper out and so forth. So, but it was every old system that collapsed because of that kind of action was replaced by a new system exactly the same, because that's what the world did. There was never been any prolonged case in history anyway, where banks ever continued to operate completely honestly and openly and keep their contracts and ask for no favors except what everybody in the rest of the world got. Didn't ask for any tax supported subsidies or special conditions. They could lie when other companies would have to be folded if they were caught lying in their contracts and so forth. So up until now, we've been able to replace one bad currency system with a good one that gradually deteriorated back into a bad one again. That was been the cycle. On sort of the old axiom of if evil can be achieved through a process, it will be. Well, if something has been developed can be used for good or evil, guess which one is going to end up being used for? For both of them, of course. But the most technological advances we've ever seen in history have always been used for evil more than for good. And need I just mention the weapons of war as an example. And now we come to this point in history where money, suddenly for the first time in the history of mankind, the technology has arrived whereby a new monetary system can be created completely different from the old. And this one, as far as I can see, doesn't even have the capacity for good. It's all for evil. But it can be described as being good by saying it's going to replace the old system, which is terrible. So they'll say that, well, the old system that's collapsing around us, especially in the few years ahead when people may be starving and maybe fighting with each other for available food, and our system as we know it is really crumbling around us, then somebody could say, well, this new system is not so hot, but it's better than the old one where everybody's killing each other. And so by comparison, it might be described as good, but there would be nothing good really about it. And what is that system? They're calling it digital. That's not quite accurate in the sense that people think of it. They call it cryptocurrency in a way, meaning everybody knows that means digital. We've got digital money now, let's face it. Our credit cards are digital money. It's just a plastic card. There's nothing of intrinsic value there. And it's not even like a checkbook where you write a piece of paper and you make an agreement. I agree to pay such and such a party. I just wrote their name there, see? And I'm going to pay them this amount of money, see that? That's a contract. It doesn't even have that. It's just a card. You slip it in the slot and or go to the grocery store. And what we're heading into now is a technocracy, which is so highly advanced with computer excellence that they don't need exchange of money at all anymore. And they're in the process of convincing people that it's a good idea to become a cashless society. They've been working on that for a long, long time, but it's never been possible to make it happen because there's no way that they had a technology where they could make one currency apply to the whole world. And until they could do that, you could always escape one currency and go to the other one. You don't like American dollars, go buy Japanese yen, or go somewhere else and buy another currency that might be a little bit better. And you could even trade currencies and make money on that process. And besides that, the money was yours. Now we're going into this system where it is a true international monetary currency. There will be only one. They're calling it a central bank digital currency. There'll be different nations that sign up for it, but it'll all be part of one centralized global currency. And there's no other place to go. There will be no other currencies that will be legalized. So you'd have to be deeply into the black market to survive even. And even that, we have the technology now to see who is cheating. They'll know who you talk to, for God's sake. They'll be monitoring you with satellites from the sky. They'll know how close you're standing to somebody who has a police record. They may even be able to hear what you're saying. This is technology that has never existed before in history. And it is not only coming, it is here now. And they're working as fast as they can to close the door on all these other options and make us have to use, without exception, you talk about a cartel or a monopoly, they want to have a monopoly of money, so we have no place else to go except to the central bank digital currency. And that, furthermore, that digital currency will not be ours. We will not own it. We'll be allowed to use it, but it'll belong to the central banks. They've made that very clear. So even though you have, let's say, the equivalent of, let's call them dollars. They'll probably call them something else. Let's just say Ameros or something for American dollars. Anyway, let's call them Ameros. You may have 1,500 Ameros in your checking account or your credit account, but if you say something even remotely close to what I'm saying here on this program, you suddenly will be punished. Your 1,500 Ameros will be reduced like bingo to maybe 750, and you'll be told why. And now you thought you had $1,500, and your rent's coming due, and that's $800, and you've only got 750. You can't pay your rent, nor to say nothing about buying groceries, or buying gas for your car, or make the payment on your car, or do anything else. You will be sitting out on the street without a house to live in, and without food to drink and to eat. All you can do is sit in the corner with a tin cup begging, but nobody has any coins to put in there either, so they can't even help you if they wanted to. This is the system we're coming to, and it's the first time in history that the technology has made that actually possible. And these guys are drooling over getting it into being as quickly as possible. And I think they are planning to have it all wrapped up by, probably 2030. They keep talking about that. But I think they're shooting for an operational model much before 2030. I think in the next couple of years, we may begin to see this thing unfold unless, and I want to say this emphatically, unless we stop it.